Yeah, I will talk about onion services in the wild and basically how onion service and their users get de-anonymized in practice. Yeah, it's a work by me and my co-author, Adrian Tippe. And onion services are a future of the Tor network, the leading anonymization network, which allow users to set up anonymous services that are reachable inside the Tor network. This can offer a secure platform, for example, whistleblowers, but at the same time is also exploited by criminals who maybe facilitate crimes online. The academic research that we found mainly focuses on technical vulnerabilities, for example, like how do you correlate traffic, or maybe can you get some patterns out of the network traffic that you locally observe. But users tend to remain a less focused area. There are some papers that talk and research user issues. For example, if I go online and I spread my PGP keys, maybe they can be linked, or maybe my Bitcoin address that I use on a darknet market also appears in my Twitter account. But it's rather isolated singular mistakes users make. At the same time, there's a lot of questionable online advice. When I shortly searched how to use Tor browser securely, this advice popped up very fast to basically use a VPN, which is maybe not what a beginning Tor user should hear first. And also the Tor project has very limited resources when you look at their website of how to actually use the Tor network securely. So our goal was to identify how real-world users are de-anonymized in practice, and after searching for potential sources, where can we find any information about this, we decided to basically model law enforcement agencies as a powerful attacker, as they have a lot of resources and are very persistent in some cases. For this, we analyzed US court cases and used an open coding approach in 3 iterative rounds, and categorized the offenses and the investigative methods that law enforcement uses. We created a comprehensive codebook that is included in our appendix, and then selectively coded the remaining court cases. On the bottom you can see an example of how the codebook looks, with like the code itself, then the description and examples, and one or more example quotes that can help the raters to correctly classify the cases. Overall, we have 136 court cases that are included in our analysis. They are covering the recent years, starting in 2011, and 38 out of 94 US district courts. So we do actually get some coverage of the different courts. And it includes a few large operations, so where law enforcement basically conducted a large operation, like taking over a child pornography platform in the Playpen case, and then investigating subsequently all their users. We have created 17 categories for investigative methods and tried to note the identifying leads that mark the breakthrough moment in the investigation. So the moment where users actually made mistakes that led the investigation to identifying the suspects. Here you can see on the table basically the key phrases that we used in order to catch the documents, and then the distribution of the different offenses. So most offenses are actually drug vendors, and these are followed by people sharing child sexual abuse material online. The main finding is that most of the investigative methods actually resemble traditional methods. So physical surveillance is used in 58.8% of all the cases, meaning that basically you have a camera somewhere that pictures you, or an agent tailing your car, or maybe looking into your window. Also, physical search in 72.8%, basically meaning someone goes into your home, your garden, your car, whatever, and maybe searches through your electronic devices that you have. Undercover infiltration with 66.2% is also a popular angle used by law enforcement. Then we find that users do make a lot of mistakes, and these mistakes are almost entirely based on behavioral mistakes. So we are talking about criminals who potentially face life sentences in the harsh cases without parole. that are technically sophisticated, running criminal enterprises for a prolonged time, and they still do make, in some cases, simple mistakes, like misconfiguring their onion services. The investigative methods vary by the offense. For example, drug vendors are quite often caught by tracking the mail streams and then just basically surveilling the post office. People sharing child sexual abuse material, they are caught by basically, or very often caught by catching the metadata or analyzing the metadata in the investigation, and caught by physical searches very often. So this can be, for example, a random border check when your device is scanned. The onion services are prone to misconfigurations and linking information. Technical attacks do affect many users at once, which is a critical issue. There are three types of technical attacks that we distinguished. The first ones are misconfigurations, for example, you not correctly shielding your onion service traffic so that your onion services may be directly reachable over the internet. Then malware, which was surprisingly often used, with around 14%, basically infiltrating a website and then trying to spread some JavaScript or Adobe Flash code to circumvent the Tor browser protection and catching a lot of users on maybe unethical platforms. And then we recorded one instance where the Tor protocol was actually broken in 2014, but that's the only instance we found, and it was a research institute. So these Tor protocols attacks are extremely exceptional, and also the technical attacks are kinda rare, and even most of them can be avoided by behavioral changes, and only in one case the users could actually not really do much when they trust Tor. After receiving our reviews and reiterating over what we did, we decided to broaden our research questions to incorporate the legal aspects. So we also used this chance to validate the codebook that we created by basically having 3 raters using the codebook for 10 court cases and trying to calculate the agreement, which is expressed in Krippendorff's alpha coefficient, which resulted in 0.82, which generally indicates a high agreement among the raters. Most of the cases that we observed ended with a plea deal, which basically is an agreement between prosecutor and defendants to not go to trial but agree on a common sentence, or at least suggest a common sentence to the judge. And we found that legal defense for Tor users, at least in the court cases we analyzed, is pretty challenging. So we distinguish in 2 different legal defenses. The first one is based on legal grounds, so procedural mistakes, or challenging the validity of search warrants. So maybe saying there was no probable cause for the search of my PC. The technical challenges are way harder to mount. Can also be seen that there are just less cases mounting technical challenges, and these basically go to suppressing certain evidence because the method is unreliable, or sitting in front of a jury and basically saying it's junk science and should not be trusted. We can see that this varies a lot by the offense. So drug vendors tend to have less legal challenges and almost no technical challenges in our data set, meaning that these might be more standardized, or maybe the people have less meaning of defending themselves. While for the onion service providers, the cases were quite complex, with a lot of challenges, especially to the technical part. In one operation, Playpen, there were a lot of legal challenges. That was where law enforcement take over a child pornography distributing platform and basically mounting a variety of defenses from the government conduct is so outrageous that the case should be thrown out. And we also note that international collaboration is very important for high-profile case, and that law enforcement is actually not able to solve these cases by looking at their own jurisdiction. So the more impact a crime has on an international scale, the more likely a law enforcement has to cooperate internationally. This also validates that the methods that we observed actually shared among different law enforcement agencies, at least the one the US is cooperating with, because in a court document we could partially see the methods used by other countries, and we also saw that the US spends quite some money on trying to catch criminals which are not residing in the US, not citizens of the US, where the crime is committed mainly outside of the US. So the US actually seems to be one of the most active, if not the most active, law enforcement agencies. Out of this, we created recommendations for 3 different target groups of ethical Tor users: beginners, experienced, and onion service operators. We see that law enforcement does have best results when they infiltrate big platforms and then subsequently go against the users, but they do require international collaboration. Then lawmakers in society should think about how to regulate law enforcement agencies, because there are many gray areas. For example, in one case, a government court argued that you have no reasonable expectation of privacy for your IP address because you volunteer your IP address to the website you visit. And then what technical evidence is actually reliable and legal to use in court? These are gray areas. And with this, I welcome questions and discussion thoughts. Thank you, Speaker.
Questions, please. Yes, Roger. Everyone else should be thinking of their next question.
How do you handle ground truth of the data? So we learned from the Snowden documents about parallel construction, where the DEA has internal guidelines on how to lie in court about how they actually decided to bust somebody. So every time I read a court document, I wonder if this is actually what they did or if they're just constructing a plausible story.
I mean, there's some disincentive to use parallel investigations. For example, it's your maybe honest reputation. And the second one is if you lie in court and you're caught, you do have some prosecution coming after you potentially. And it's a lot of different district attorneys and police agents that do this. So it would be, in my opinion, quite unlikely that all of them are using parallel investigations all the time. But we cannot exclude this. We have seen one case where it was a bit questionable what they did. They basically used an exploit, and afterwards the code was suddenly lost, and they only had to compile code. But at least when I was reading the court documents, there was no case where I was questioning where this information came from. And even if they use parallel investigations, they still have to afterwards come up with a plausible way. And that could be an angle that you could still improve, even if there's an almighty institution.
So these are all U.S. court cases, correct? Are other sources of potential extension of this work, like other countries' court cases?
We used a couple of media reports that were long researched, had interviews, and founded on data that is also confirmed by press releases. The problem is that court cases need to be accessible, and in many countries they're maybe not directly accessible. Then there are language barriers, and also it's very favorable, the jury system, because everything needs to be presented to an average person and broken down. And for example, I looked at German court documents, and the amount of things you can draw out of this is way less, because they don't need to structure it in a case of this is how it started, this is how it proceeded, that's what we found. But it's totally enough if you basically say, we searched your device and we found this, and then it doesn't really matter how did you come to this evidence. So it's not really useful, for example, to use German court documents.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again.